to talk a little bit this afternoon about power and compression, compressed air solutions. I will tell you, and Pete, is here from my local Kaiser guy, and he's going to tell us all about the Kaiser compressor and some of the things that he's learned in the last 10 years and how it might relate to us. More of a generalities, and I will say that, where's Matt? I can't even, where did he go? Oh, he's somewhere, went to the restroom or something. We are working on other solutions. We don't really know where it's going to go with FIAC. I know it's one of his favorite vendors, and so we'll take a look. We don't know if they have a solution that's going to be competitive to the Kaiser right now. I believe, for what we know, the Kaiser compressor is the compressor of choice. So this is Tom Grayford. Welcome everybody. Welcome Tom to the meeting. Tom is probably one of the saddest business days of my last 10 years in Lake County was when he told me that he decided to sell his business. I'm like, I lost my electrician. Shoot. And so that was pretty disappointing. And I really got to know you the most when we did the crypto miners.
That's right.
Yeah, so he comes in and I said, yeah, I need like, Oscar, how many was it?
You need a lot.
15 220 volt outlets along this wall. And he's looking at me like, what? So he did a great job with that. And then he did some other work for us, and every time he's just one of those rare relationships, and I encourage you to try to find the guy in your area where you just turn him loose, you don't worry about it, you're not going to get hammered, you're not going to overpay for something, he's going to do a great job for you. So then he decided, I don't know if I got the chronology right, you said, no, it's okay, I'm going to work with the guy I sold the business to. I'm like, oh, okay, that's better than losing him all the way. Well, then he decided to go work for the county as an inspector. And I said, dang.
Thanks, guys.
And so, so he played that game for a while. And then tell us a little bit about your career as an electrician, and then why did you leave being an inspector for the county, Tom?
Oh, my God. So I've been an electrician for probably about 30 plus years. Had my own business for, like Scott said, for probably about 25, almost 25 years. And decided that I was kind of burnt out from, dealing with customers and homeowners, and I thought, well, I need a change.
Not me.
Not Scott. Right. So sold my business, worked for the company that I sold it for about a year, and decided to try inspecting. So I did that for about a little over a year and realized it wasn't for me. The government life wasn't for me. So decided to come back into, it's like anything you do for so long. I mean, it's almost like a calling. It's hard to escape it. So anyways, I love it, and I'm glad to be back.
So what would you say to the guys about their experience working, since you spent some time with the county, you got a little taste of them, obviously you worked with them as a contractor for years, and then you're actually in the thick of it. What did you learn from that 1 year experience that maybe you didn't know being on the outside for so long? Or did you learn anything?
Yeah, I did. On the outside, I always thought, oh, these crazy codes and these crazy inspectors just driving us nuts. But there is somewhat of a method of madness. There is definitely a need for some oversight. Having been on the other side, I think it is good. Do they have probably too much power? Yeah, I think so. But it definitely keeps honest contractors honest and homeowners honest. So I think that's what I mean.
Yeah. So when dealing with customers throughout your career, best story ever, top challenge that you consistently dealt with interacting with a customer relative to your industry. So if you have a story, if you can't come up with it, that's all right. But fun stories are always fun.
I can't think of anything. There's so many, there's so many different. Probably what stands out most is not the best, it's probably the worst. I think is what you remember more than anything. But I would say don't work for attorneys. That's the best I can come up with.
Wow.
I'm sure there's a deeper story there that probably doesn't need to be told
yeah.
under the circumstance.
But so many good customers out there. I would have to say 95% of the people that you work for, maybe more than that, are good people and honest people.
So in our setting and what we're doing in powering this massive, 40 horse, motor, talk to the guys that, some people are very familiar with, single phase, three phase, why, what's the purpose of three phase versus single phase? Why is it so expensive to because where do I put my compressor? Do I move it closer to the electrical box to save money on running electricity, or do I have Pete come in and run pipe? What is it better to move the compressor closer to the work, so less pipe costs? Or it would seem to me that the more common scenario is the electrical is going to be the more expensive. Why is that? And then what about copper and aluminum?
Yeah, so any large load like a compressor would be better the closer to the power source, the better. So obviously the farther you get away, you have voltage drop to contend with, which means larger wire. Typically copper wire in commercial and industrial is used more than aluminum. They're both acceptable, but the cost of copper is just astronomical, especially now. So the closer to the power source, the better. The equipment will run more efficiently. Generally speaking, you're talking about three-phase. Most shops are going to be equipped with probably a 240 volt three-phase system, unless it's an industrial park or something like that, where you have 480 available. The higher the voltage, typically the better for the equipment. It runs a little bit more efficiently. In your situation here, you actually have the lowest end of the scale of voltage, and we're still able to make it work. He's at 208 volts. The lower the voltage, the higher the amp draw. So in your situation, you got about 110 amp draw with the 40 horse, right?
Yeah.
40 horse compressor. So yeah, generally speaking, you're going to be as close as you can to the power source.
If this were 480, same system, what kind of amp draw would I be pulling, do you think?
About half. So you'd be at about 50 amps at 480 volts. But 480 volts sometimes is not that prevalent unless you're in a big industrial situation.
And then, so the options, if you want to move, you can go from 208, 240 to 480 with a variable frequency drive or with a step-up transformer, correct? Or the VFD is phase.
Yeah, the VFD is would be part of the compressor itself. Pete can probably speak more to that. If you wanted to go 480 volts, you would have to have a step-up transformer from whatever voltage is supplied at your shop, to 480. Again, the big factor is probably like the trouble that we had here was your actual service size coming into the building. If you have only 200 amps or 300 amps, that's a major consideration before you purchase the equipment to find out what kind of service do I have. Here you're fortunate to have rented 2 spaces so you could draw from the power in one space and the power in this space. If you didn't have that, remember we were talking about upgrading the service. That's a major consideration, service size.
So we've distinguished pretty much that you shouldn't move into this larger dry ice cleaning space unless you're going to do, if you're only going to do the Evo, that's another thing, but if you're going to do the bigger machines, you want 200 plus amps, unless you're fortunate that you have 480 volts, which would be a less amp draw. But you might, if you do have to change your system, the local governing authority is going to want a load chart. So they're going to want to know, what is the PCS 60 or the ICS 430, what does it draw, how many amps for the dryer, how many amps for the compressor. So they want to see all of those values in a sum total so that they can confirm that you have enough to manage at startup. It's not that they need that much to run all the time, it's just they force you to calculate at startup, because that's the most draw that an electric motor has. You gotta actually overkill your system to be safe. And is there if you have 200 amp and your load chart says 185, are they gonna go, eh?
No, as long as you don't exceed, when you do your load calculation, as long as you don't exceed the service size, you're okay. And, you know, when you do the service size, you're calculating all of your loads, like your compressor, you're gonna have a continuous load. All of that's factored in before you get to that final number. And as long as that final number is under your service size, then you're okay. Obviously, it's not always nice to have a little bit of wiggle room. You don't want to be running at your max, especially with industrial equipment. Yeah, so that's a big concern.
We've got some other things to talk about. Any questions that come to your mind as pertains to what you guys are going through right now? That they're getting their systems installed, or spaces that you're looking at, and the power? Anything? Man, you guys are pretty easy. For all the calls and questions I get about power, I'm
When the
surprised.
building doesn't have three-phase, I know, I had a colleague of mine, I have three-phase. He installed something else, it was like a motor to generate that dirt.
Yes.
Rotary phase converter.
Yeah, phase converter, yes. Yeah, so you can install a phase converter. Some of it depends obviously on your service size, and then the phase converter, it will convert into three-phase, but there's still some load considerations. You know, if you have a 100-amp service, you know, you still have to be careful of what size your motor you're running off that phase converter, because you could easily exceed the phase converter size or the service size. So that is a solution, but if it's, I would still recommend looking into increasing the service size of three-phase service, especially if you're going to have multiple pieces of equipment.
So this system, what's the big box on the wall? Why did we put that box on there?
That's a fused disconnect for the compressor, and the reason we did that over a breaker is because the size of the fuses exceeded the size of a standard circuit breaker for your piece of equipment. So it required 150 amp fuses, and the largest breaker, plug-on breaker that would fit in a panel is 125 amps. So, and fuses also have a higher AIC rating, and it kind of gets a little bit more technical, but basically it's it will accept or allow any short circuits that you have. It will handle it much better than a breaker rated at 10,000 AIC. Typically, a fuse disconnect has an AIC rating of about 100,000 amps. So when you talk about industrial equipment, typically you use fuse disconnects.
Okay. Mark, do you have a, what, is Mark here? Oh, he's going too. Everybody,
I thought Kaiser required a fuse disconnect.
Pete, is that true?
Breaker or fuse disconnect is what I've always told everybody. So one or the other, you have to have the protections. You can't get away from that. You'll have to have one or the other. It's better to have both, but I have many customers with one and not the other, so.
Any other electrician-related questions, even on a mobile side? Yeah.
Question, you know how the power company they changed your rate according to the peaks? I was reading about installing some capacitors to help when the first starts. All the equipment like me, I have paint booths, prep stations, compressors. You as an expert, do those systems really work?
I've seen, like, they have power conditioning units. That's more of sort of steadying out the sine waves and that type of thing. But as far as making your system more efficient, are you talking about for like energy savings?
They raised my rate big time. My
I'm
power
sure
bill,
in a tier.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a different tier now because of that.
It's doubtful that it's going to help you with that,
Yeah.
to be honest with you.
Because one electrician told me just turn on the equipment, like turn on your lights in the morning, wait 5-10 minutes, because I come in the morning and turn on everything pretty much at the same time in a sequence. He told me that's why the peak went so high and they got to charge you more.
No, I mean, they're basing on kilowatt hours. So once you reach a threshold of kilowatt hours, then you'll go into the next tier of billing. So the start of it has not going to have an effect on that.
All right, well, awesome. Appreciate you taking the time to come. Yeah, thanks, Tom. And just know that I always have this resource. If you have you need somebody, can't get hold of your guy, or you're maybe not trusting, possibly, you're a local guy, just give me a call, and I'll be glad to ask Tom for a second opinion. We're all entitled to that opportunity. Appreciate you taking time. Hope the meal was worth the trip.
It was.
And we'll carry on. We'll get right into it with Pete. So if you want to come up, Pete. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So, Rex is here, isn't he?
He just went outside.
That's hilarious, like 3 for 3. So I was gonna chide myself because I'm not exactly the most easy person to work for or with. I'm pretty particular, and I tried to be as gentle as I could be with Pete when he first came in. And I don't really know how I was able to have the right effect, but it wasn't, maybe 15, 20 minutes into the job, I could tell that he was really trying to, he was doing things that's like, I wouldn't expect anybody to figure that out for me. So there's a reason why this looks the way it looks, and it's not me, it's that he figured out who I am early and he executed. So if you think this is a cool system and the way that it's, like this right here, this horizontal plug and this horizontal plug, those are all done for a reason.
And these will be Kaiser gray before.
Yeah, we'll have those painted before you come next year. They'll be the proper gray color. So yeah, minions, maybe, maybe not. I don't know if we're gonna do the minions on them or not. We might. So I'm just gonna basically turn it over to Pete and have him explain why he did what he did and recommended, the settings. There's a lot of accoutrements here that you may or may not decide you need or want, but we wanted to show what was possible, carte blanche, like the best that you could possibly install the system. And so please welcome Pete Bunce.
Thank you, sir. It was the Shelby that caught my attention.
Oh yeah, the black Shelby KR
First time I met
is here.
him, we were looking at the GT500. Very, very impressive. Scott, thank you for lunch. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Deborah. I've been with compressed air for 10 years. Came into the industry not knowing even what Kaiser meant, what it was, what it did, how it worked, anything about it. Compressed air systems, who I'm here to represent today and try to help you guys out. They sent us through training. Kaiser makes us all go through a factory school. Anybody, whether you got a distributor or you got factory direct in your area, they should all be well qualified enough to answer all of your questions. Not quite sure how to start out, but I want to go with questions first.
Yeah,
Is
sure.
that okay? We'll go with questions from you guys, and then we'll go over what we got here, how we laid it out. Anybody have anything in particular they want to touch on?
Yeah, they're good.
No, good?
Quiet group. We just
Quiet
ate.
group.
They'll be sleeping any minute.
I already got my question.
Yeah, right?
Well, what were your questions, Mark, so the rest of them can hear?
So mine set up a little bit differently, and I just wanted to make sure from his expertise it was done right. If I spent that amount of money, the filters on the back of his tanks, he's got one filter on the back of each of his tanks, where I have 2 filters coming off my first tank before my descant and nothing off my last. So I wanted to see if that was done right. I definitely got suckered into a lot of the useless things, like the PVC pipe for $500 and the bucket for $1,000.
So what he's referring to is the
The condensation
condensation management system.
and manifold.
Yeah, and manifold. The manifold is basically a PVC piece of pipe, maybe an inch or inch and a half diameter, with 2 caps and holes drilled in the side and nipples screwed in, and it's, how much? I don't know, it's a lot.
$500.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pricey.
Yeah.
You can go to Depot and buy some PVC and a couple caps and taps and drills. And
And do it,
do
yeah.
up
And
yourself.
then the condensation management is really, it's to make sure that the condensation leaving your building is gonna pass the EPA standard. So like, it's just, you know, I wouldn't drink it, but if you go out and look at the concrete, there's no oil stain on the concrete as this has been running. So it cleans that, and this is about a $500 item. The Kaiser version is 2 to 3 times that much. They do the same thing. I actually have an old Kaiser cartridge in the other bay. I can show it to you to see what it looks like. I mean, to me, it looks like cat litter in there. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't look like $500, but I can't find one for less. So that's just, you know, if you want to do condensation management and you're not doing this in a place where you can just dump the water on the ground, you're going to need one of those.
Definitely do the condensate management if you can. That way, if anybody comes in to do inspections, at least you're covered, you don't have to worry about them. The little blue pail works just as good as the Kaiser. You might have to change this out a little bit more than the other one, but oversize them. If you're going to go through Kaiser and you're going to buy a CMS, a condensate management system, if it says you need a KCF 50, go with the KCF 100. Just oversize it, or you're going to be changing it out twice a year. That's something that I've noticed around here. It's like, it says right on it, 3,000 hours for typical usage, but they generally don't make it because of our humidity and the amount of water that we produce. We don't make air, we make water in Florida, so it just pushes it out. The design is all Scott Ailes. In his particularness, he wanted everything perfect, and it was inspiring. It was, at first, he's right, I didn't know how to think. But as I listened to him and his grace and his patience, I was like, yeah, okay, this is nice. This is going to be a masterpiece when we're done. And it turned out very well. Back to the filter conversation. It could be argued about how the filters are going to go. You could have done one filter on the inlet, one on the outlet, the KB, the K. The way we chose to do it for this particular system was put the KB prior to the desiccant to get rid of our bulk water, oil, particulates, all that. So we're going to have pretty clean air going into your desiccant dryer. Because of what you're doing, your process is so fine. You don't want any oil out there when you're doing your blasting, right?
We don't want oil, we don't want desiccant dust.
Right. So we put the KE filter going out of his dry tank to catch all of that. Now, this is, I'm not going to say perfect because there's nothing ever perfect, but this is the pretty close system. Yeah. You got a wet tank. You got your dryer, and you got a dry tank. So you're storing, you're getting rid of bulk water, and you're going to send dry air coming out high on your tank, which comes back down into the bottom part of your dryer, and then coming back out, going down low into the tank, and coming back out. So we're always going to go, and all of your guys as distributors, or factory direct Kaiser, they're gonna pump it this way. If you see somebody coming in from your compressor into the lower part of your tank, put a stop to it, because that's not.
Why is
no,
that?
no, coming into the bottom of the tank is correct. You want to go out high, because in case water builds up, we don't.
Right.
So I apologize.
So that's the purpose, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Don't feel bad. I actually said in a video that's got 1.8 million views that I use a torque wrench to take the lugs off a wheel. So, you know, when you make a little faux pas in your conversation, nobody can beat that.
Just back it up real quick and correct it, right?
Will there be any moisture in the dry tank?
There better not be. If there is, it's time to take a look, call service tech out, look at the desiccant dryer. Why, is there water in that tank?
No, I'm just curious.
There better not be.
Zero. Should never.
Should never happen.
Never. Yeah, if you do, there's something wrong.
Yeah, yes, you need immediate attention. Now, Kaiser desiccant dryer versus the Nano. I don't really care for what your process is. I don't care what you're doing as long as you're getting dry air out there. Agreed? That's all that matters. I do like our Kaiser products. I'm very passionate about it. That's why I work here. It's why I'll continue to work here until they send me down the road. But the Nano dryer is a very dependable dryer as well. The footprint of this outweighs all of it. You are not fitting a Kaiser dryer in this area. There's no way possible.
But it's not yellow.
We can paint the Nano yellow if we have to. Scott's probably thought about that, actually. It's not super loud. I mean, it all is in this, office-like room and environment, so it's not bad. It does the job. Scott, and I apologize for this, because I don't know what dew point we're getting with the Nano. A refrigerated dryer is only going to get us down to what, 36, 37 degree dew point? It's dropping to a negative 40. That is significant. That is huge.
That's the
That's
part
awesome.
that the compressed air people, oh, you don't need a desk and dryer, that's ridiculous. That's for, science rooms or laboratories or hospitals, What they don't get is that 108 negative media that's going in our line. 36 degree dew point versus negative 40 is a massive swing. You got it. We thought originally that we needed to go to negative 100, and we got with Dr. Dew Point, and he kind of expressed us like, look, you guys, even if you set the desiccant dryer up to be negative 100 more cycles more often, by the time it gets out there or wherever you're taking it, you're probably losing that little bit of increase. You're just wasting a lot of air for what we're doing. So we pulled back from that initial concept that, hey, if we can get negative 100, that's better. Let's do it. Well, it's not beneficial enough for the workload you put on the unit.
I'm assuming if you could get down into the negative dew point, you're probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
Just getting past that. Now, a couple things that you and I talked about, Scott, that would be in addition to the system. This is pretty awesome. Dew point monitor. If we're really worried about dew point, putting a monitor tapped into the line going out of the dryer would be a great addition. Something that you can see and say, okay, I'm negative 19, 15, 10, whatever, I'm good. You just walk by and look at it, right? The more evident our facts are on our system, such as the Kaiser controller, this thing's going to tell you everything you need to know about your compressor. It's very easy to navigate. I'm going to give you guys a card. I might not be in your area, but you can call me anytime, and I can probably guide you through the controller to acknowledge alarms, reset maintenance, do whatever we can to help you guys out. And it's free to talk. Our controller is very easy to get to. Kaiser did a good job on designing it. It's going to protect itself. I don't know the knowledge of compressors and what homework's been done.
Can you talk about, we have the understanding that a rotary compressor is happy when it's running all day, duty cycle, versus a piston compressor. Some of these guys are running mobile units, and so they're having to make that decision, do I want to get a rotary gas power, or do I want a piston? Or even the guys that maybe this is even more important. You've got a system, it's not big enough, can I just add another 20 horse or 15 horse to what I already have? Can you can you add compressors to get the capacity you want?
You can, a rotary screw, be very careful. We want to achieve at least a 50% duty cycle on a rotary screw.
So does everybody understand what that means? 50% duty cycle, so what does that mean?
You want to work it as much as you can. You want when it's running in a half an hour, we want to make air for a half an hour of that hour. We want to work it, the harder, the better, the longer they'll live. If you run a unit, I've got one in the area that's running about 5% duty cycle. How it's been online for 5 years, I can't tell you. But they generally will die. The air ends will fail. Water will build up in the oil circuit. It'll kill your bearings. And those air ends aren't cheap. It doesn't matter what manufacturer. It's just extremely expensive for the air ends.
All right, so Tom, we run this 40 horse compressor for 10 hours. I know Mount Dora is like super cheap electricity, but I'm just trying to get a sense of, making the conscious decision to not shut the compressor off. Is it that it's just idling and running, or it's under load and you're pulling the trigger using air?
Under load.
Under load.
Under load, yeah.
So let's say I'm dry cleaning for 2 hours and I'm going to take a break for an hour or two. Is it better to shut it off or leave it run at idle?
Just shut it off. But it'll time out. If your system's tight, the compressor will go to sleep and then kick back on whenever air demand is, when it's requested, or drop below a set point. Hold on, let me grab a statistic from this. So this thing will pretty much tell you anything you want to know on this controller, Sigma 2 controller. You are at 40% duty cycle right now with whatever you have done since we've installed this. And I know you
I
haven't.
don't like the fact that he knows, and I didn't know first.
We also can tell you how many times you've started and stopped this unit. We've only had 66 starts since the day we started the unit up. So it's gonna give you a detailed rundown of what your unit's doing and where what you've been, it tells me what you've been doing. If your workload's high, if you come into these controllers, you can go back weeks and look and see what your demand was a couple weeks ago, see what issues you had, see what your temperature was, what your pressure was. If you drop below a set point pressure out there when you're blasting, you'll be able to see that. So it gives you like an air demand analysis, and that's all included in Kaiser's controller. So that will definitely help.
And then talk to him about so we set our compressor up. I didn't want to drop below 130. So you can think about this. When a compressor, you turn it on, it's going to build up pressure and stop at a certain PSI. So I chose 150 because they like to see at least 20 PSI spread between when it kicks on again to when it stops. So if I want 130, if I want that compressor to come back on and start making air at 130, I gotta set it at 150 on the high side. What's the problem with 150 with Kaiser, the warranty, yada yada on that compressor?
The higher the pressure, the lower the CFM.
But
Does that?
relative to the warranty, wasn't there an issue that you warned me that if I run this thing at 150 instead of 135 or 140, there was some circumstance that
The warranty.
warranty.
The warranty. So Kaiser will sell you up to 217 PSI unit if that's what you're wanting. You can order that unit, but it'll be up to your technician or local distributor or whoever to turn your pressure down to I think it's 145, don't quote me, 140 or 145. If you have to take a picture of it, and once you set that to that pressure, they'll cover you under the 5-year warranty. High pressure units, they will not cover under a 5-year warranty, okay? So if you need the high pressure, make sure whoever's doing your startup, because every single Kaiser that is sold that's new will have to have a factory startup done on it, okay? So make sure they set your pressure accordingly so that you can opt for the 5-year if you're wanting the 5-year
So
warranty.
before the first year's up, you could re-up for another 4 years or 5?
You would extend it for 4 years. So with the Kaisers, you're gonna get a 1-year bumper-to-bumper warranty, excludes fuses. Without that warranty, you get the second year. You'll get the air end and the drive motor will be covered. After that second year, there's nothing covered, unless you opt for that 5-year program, which then covers the motor and the air end, which are the two most expensive parts on the compressor. So, real quick, if I may, about Kaiser and their warranty. You're going to service your investment, correct? Once a year like they recommend? I would assume so. You're going to buy those parts. Let's say Scott buys those parts from me right now and I bring out each part individually. All Kaiser's trying to do is say you sign up for the program. You're going to get all those parts in one box. You're going to pull oil samples every 3,000 hours for me and we'll cover you under a warranty. That's pretty cool. Because really it's a free warranty. It doesn't seem like it, but it is. You're going to buy those parts anyways, and the parts are to be bought on your anniversary date, which is the beginning of the year. Those parts will be used the following year. So, yeah, you got to buy another kit the following year, but costs of the parts are going up every single year, except for this year. They actually did not raise the prices on the parts. So that's pretty cool.
And how much would an annual service approximately cost on this?
Labor and parts?
Yeah.
You're probably going to be, I'm gonna go high. It's
Yeah.
always safe to go high. I'd say probably about 2,500 bucks.
Okay.
Depending on your environment, whether it's climate controlled or not. Placement of your compressor. It's going to be, placement of the compressor is everything. Foundation. If we ran 1/2-inch piping to your workstation, your foundation's wrong. this isn't gonna do any good. You can buy the best compressor in the world, but if our foundation's not set properly, so keep that in mind, make sure your facts on your pipe size are going to match what your CFM is going to be pushed through to your system. That pipe there can give you way more than what we can give you, so that's, I just wanted to drop back on that, because your foundation is your piping, the foundation is not the compressor. I think a lot of times I actually run into where people, well, I just need a bigger compressor, because, well, you have half-inch pipe, you can't push that amount of CFM through that size pipe.
And what about venting? So we vented this, because it's Florida, we vented this outside. And so for those of you who don't know, our philosophy, so there's a couple things happening here, it might not be obvious. You've got a very weird small area that the compressor pulls the air in and compresses the air. It's inside the box. You can open it up, Pete, and show them approximately where it's at. But the actual cooler on the other side of the compressor, you can more look at it later, pulls the air in, goes through the cooler, and goes out. We've got a pipe outside. We use that to our advantage. If Rex is in there working, or I'm working, and we're getting a higher CO2 concentration in the workspace, we'll open that garage door back there about a foot, and we know CO2 gas is heavier than air, so it's at the ground. So when we run this compressor, this thing is sucking air through that cooler, pushing it outside. We're drawing air through that space to lower our parts per million CO2 in the workspace when we need to. So we actually, it's a duty site, it's a double duty for us. It works very well. But you might go through the roof if you don't want to heat your area, or you might actually have it in the winter deflect into your workspace because it'll warm your workspace.
It is the best heater you're gonna have in your shop. Absolutely, yep. Duck them out, placement of the compressor, back to Tom and the electrical. Give Tom the 3 feet that's required by code. When you give 3 feet all the way around your compressor when you're setting them up, if you can. Give the service technicians coming in behind, make sure you're getting set up properly. Just pay attention to the details like that. What he's done with the ducting here and for how he put it in and how neat, and it's perfect. I mean, it's amazing. Your intake for compressing the air is a small, probably 8 by 4 inch.
It's just crazy. I think it's
Great.
crazy to be making that much air, and it's just this little
Yep.
intake for the whole thing.
I don't know how many of you have heard the laser run, but they do have some of the lower decibel levels. We could actually start this up and
Yeah, but I'll
semi.
open the door, because it's not open already.
Wide Delta start comes standard on all the Kazers too, which is a huge deal. So we're not going from, what was this, 110 amps, Tom?
Yes.
FLA? You're not going,
Oh, no. Where's Rex? Hope he's still there. I don't have keys to my door. It's supposed to be hanging on this little hook right there. That's strange. Well, keep talking, Pete, and I'll do a little homework here.
Back.
only thing I could add is higher the pressure, lower the CFM. Does that make sense to everybody? The old garden hose, wide open with no nozzle, you got max flow. That's tons of flow. That's great. Cover half of it up, you just killed your flow, but you have tons of pressure. Little recap on your foundation, make sure your piping is the correct size. If it's a Kaiser that you're rolling with, in my opinion, one of the best units out there. We work on them all. I like their design. They know what they're doing. They do a great job. And if I'll give you guys cards if you would like one. Call me anytime, even if it's just a chit chat. Say hi. What you guys are doing is
Did you
amazing.
service the East Orlando area?
Yes, yes, sir. No.
You alluded to before when I missed it, so you talked about when you point on there. Is that after the dryer or after the dry tank?
Right after the nano dry.
The dry, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
It would be cool to know what your dew point is. If you're spending the money, because the
Right.
desiccant dryers are generally more money than the refrigerated, it'd be really sweet to see what your desiccant dryer is putting out.
Sure,
Making sure
sure.
you're getting what you paid for, right?
Sure.
So if I have a 20 horse right now, would you recommend me to add the nano, add the tanks see how hard it's gonna work, instead of just adding another one that's gonna be idling. Because I know some of the guys, they're not even, they said, like, with the precision gun, we don't need 40 horse. I already have 20.
So you're running through a refrigerated dryer now? Is that-
Yes.
Okay, so when you're gonna upgrade to the desiccant dryer, that could change your situation quite a bit. Desiccant dryer is gonna require a set amount of wasted air, really, to dry your hair. So there's calculations on all that to see exactly where you would be. So you're running a 20 horse now,
Yes,
and you're thinking about adding the second 20 horse?
that was the idea, yes.
That, well, if they're set up properly, that should work out, because you can have one set to back up the other one, the lead lag scenario, you know, that should suffice. I don't know what your CFM requirements are on your blasting equipment or your process, so.
Who helps me with that here locally now?
That would be us, or our salesmen, and our engineers. They'll come out, meet with you, they'll go through, make sure that we're not gonna sell you the wrong thing. That's the worst thing to do, is eat crow, come back, take the unit that you just bought back and sell you the right thing. So they will be very careful in sizing and doing all the facts and calculations on that.
The tubing is here, that's your tubing, that's a.
Yes.
That's all smart.
Yeah, it's aluminum pipe. Everybody and their brother's got their own aluminum pipe. Sometimes the fittings will work, shouldn't be, but will work on the other brands. This particular pipe is Transair. I like their fittings. They're durable, they're tough, it's easy to put together, fast, and it looks sharp when it's done. Professional.
Until the queen arrives and we resolve where the keys went for the door to vent the air, there'll be no compressor startup or demonstration, so I'm not pinning it on her, but I don't know where they are, so we'll have to look around for those. Yeah, so I have to hold off on that. And anybody's got any other questions for Pete?
Is that 1 inch Transair?
It's 40 millimeter. I think it equals out to, what, 1.5?
Okay.
You mentioned earlier the fittings will be price of gray. What do you think?
Scott, where are you gonna get the Kaiser gray paint?
For the,
We can actually, you can order it from Kaiser.
Yeah.
I have Kaiser's yellow spray paint in the truck. I paint my hitch with it so I don't take my shims out.
You follow refar. Bring that thing to the shop and get it done.
That makes sense for you. You want some paint, Scott?
sorry?
You want me to make you some like
What am I supposed to paint?
The name.
All these galvanized fittings.
Yeah, I haven't decided on that yet. I'm thinking, I like the charcoal. I have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple questions, but any concern using galvanized over stainless for the, elbows and hard parts?
I would go stainless.
Right. If you didn't cheap out, you'd go stainless.
Absolutely. No. Yeah.
And then,
You'll be redoing the whole thing.
and then what about schedule on the hard parts? Schedule 40 versus schedule 80?
I
Any
think
concerns
we
about?
would schedule 40 on the fittings. I don't like the galvanized. You didn't see that. If you can go with stainless, I like that.
Right.
Coming out of the compressor to the tank, the wet tank, you're gonna, over time, and it doesn't matter if it's a Kaiser or whatever other manufacturer, you're gonna build up rust and particles, okay? And at some point, you're gonna have to replace those fittings anyway. So even if you put stainless there, you're still gonna build up rust and particles and stuff like that, so. But I do like the stainless idea better.
Now, inside these tanks coated, I had heard some of them.
I cannot speak of that because, no, these tanks aren't coated. No, these ones aren't. I'll just say that, they're not. No, sir. That is another expense that you can invest in if you choose to. Your wet tank, put a good drain on it. If you can't get rid of the water, well then it goes into that dryer. That desiccant dryer is not going to be super cheap to service. You shouldn't have to do that service on that dryer. And don't quote me on this because I'm not tip-top on nanos, you know, service intervals, but generally, desiccant dryers are gonna run between 3 to 5 years to service it. Not gonna beat up the Kaiser dryer, but that's a lot of desiccant in the big Kaiser dryer, okay? These do not hold as much, so that might be a little bit cheaper for the nano service than compared to the, I like the setup. If it was yellow, it'd look cool, but I mean, it looks decent in between the other tanks, so I'm okay with that.
What about the Kaiser dryer? So I got the Kaiser dryer, so what about that? Like how much is that?
The Kaiser desiccant dryer?
Yeah, desiccant dryer. Like if it needs to be changed, or if we get to the point where that dryer needs to change that.
Intervals on desiccant, I'm gonna stick with 3 to 5 years on all of them. It also depends on your, you know, are you running 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, or, you know, your running schedule would
Yeah.
be significant. We would wanna know that.
I found the key. Worked perfect. Fire it up, Pete.
Can you run a compressor that size off of a three-phase converter?
See Tom back there?
If it's large enough and designed for it, you could.
Is it, like, because a lot of buildings won't have, you know, three-phase power that these guys will be doing. Like, I've been told, like, on pressure washers not to run a converter because you'll have issues with the pump in the future. I mean,
Yeah, they're not ideal. It's probably more of an engineering question. I would definitely check with the manufacturer before I did it, yeah, for sure.
I think Kaiser, I don't think Kaiser recommends it.
Well,
If you ask Kaiser, I don't think they recommend running it.
I'm, now that I put him on in the spotlight, I'm gonna go ahead and add, I got one customer out of the thousands we have around Central Florida that is running off a converter. I have an electrical background, that's what I did before I got into this. When I went out there to check his amp draws and volt readings, I was baffled. I said, this just isn't correct, something's not right, you need to call an electrician. Come to find out he had the converter, and I don't like it. The units are still running, they've been running for, well, eight years now, 9 years. I just don't like it, I don't think it's a good idea, I don't see any, I just don't like it.
Well, the only reason you do it is if you couldn't get three-phase to your location.
Absolutely,
But
and, yeah.
they are problematic. I've always heard they're really problematic. They don't deliver what they say they're delivering.
Yep.
And then your whatever $50,000 pump, you know, compressor could be damaged, and you don't even know what's happening in your eyes.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and you're gonna have to do not everybody's gonna be able to pay to have them bring 460 into the building to give you the power that obviously Kaiser would want you to have, I would want you to have, Tom would want you to have. It's just not always gonna be like that. So, if you have to run a converter, just, get all the homework done on it first. Make sure your service can handle such a thing, correct, Tom?
That's right, yeah. Yeah, definitely check with the manufacturer for sizing and all.
One thing I want is a switch. I heard leaning over, plugging in.
I know a good electrician. You ready to hold something up?
The desiccant dryer is constantly going to be running air through it, so our compressor doesn't sleep. So it is, and that's not really true draw. I mean, the little bit of air that comes out of there, don't fool yourself into thinking that you're loading the compressor because the desiccant dryer is charging and recharging. That's not true load on the compressor. So I was kind of curious. So it's switching between towers, so it goes down to 110, it switches towers and starts blowing through the other side. So ours doesn't ever shut off because we have a desk and dryer. So that's one thing to keep in mind. A lot of systems would. But that's what we got in there all day long while we're in there blasting. Now, one thing I want to share with you, we've talked before. There's quite a bit of danger in not paying attention to your desiccant dryer and oversaturating it. If you run into that problem, you have to run that thing half throttle, like basically open the valve halfway on your compressor system for 24 hours to let that cycle through and dry out that desiccant dryer. So that's not something that you want to do, you know, to have to run your compressor under that kind of load for 24 hours just to get that thing back to even. What was the circumstance that we figured out that could be a problem where you allowed that to happen? Was it that the power, you lose power of the desiccant dryer so it's not drying?
That could be
And
it.
it saturates the granules in there.
The drain could fail on this tank, fill up with water and push. If the tank fills up with water, which
Pushing water and oil.
shouldn't happen, you should be inspecting it before it gets there. But pushes it over and soaks that. If the drain fails, you're not getting rid of water, it's going to go somewhere.
Now you guys know there's two kind of drains. You can have a timed drain or a float drain. I have floats. Timed drain, you're constantly blowing air out whether or not there's water. It doesn't make sense to me. It's more expensive for a float drain, but if like it's 27% humidity today, it's nice and dry in here. If we run this compressor, there's going to be hardly any condensation, so I'm not losing air. If you have a timed drain, it's going to go off like every 2 minutes for 6 seconds, no matter if there's moisture in there or not. So you're just wasting air and running the compressor needlessly.
One of the biggest things they teach us in Kaiser school is, you know, that guy out cleaning up at the end of the day, blowing air, blowing his bench off, blowing his clothes off, using his air for all this, that, and the other thing that's not designed for? That's costing money. That's pennies, nickels, dimes flowing out. So with the drain, back to that, the Kaiser AMD 6550 is a zero loss drain. It's just going to get rid of the water. You're not doing what the timer drain does, just like Scott said. It's not just going to go off for the heck of it because it's time to do that. The zero loss drain only goes off when needed. The filters all have internal float drains, which only go off when needed. Lets loose of the liquid, and then shut back up.
Any other questions about compressed air systems, I should say?
So I know when they asked me or showed me how to set mine up, they wanted quite a bit of space between all the equipment. Is that just for serviceability? I mean, I know on the compressor itself it needs space for air inlet and outlet and all that, but is it just serviceability?
For the most part, yes, sir. Yeah, we want, you gotta have 3 feet on the electrical side wherever, because all the units are different, so your electrical side, you gotta have 3 feet per code. But we just kind of stuck with that 3 feet around it, so I'm still skinny, I haven't gained enough weight yet, but we want all technicians, you gotta be able to get to it. You wanna be able to get to the back side with ease. But it doesn't always happen like that. I put one in yesterday, I've only got about 12 inches behind the unit. So there's a lot of work that's gonna be required to actually service that unit, but that's what they had to do, just like if you have to have a converter. Sometimes it's not gonna be perfect. This is nice. You can get to everything. Everything is still close, but you have enough room to work. But it's not going to always be perfect, but overthink your installation. When they say, well, if I came in here, Scott, I'm going to do this, this, and that, he sees what Scott sees. What he has a vision. I'm going to give it to him.
Scott, how big is the footprint of that, you know, square?
16 feet by 5 feet.
More than that.
More, 6 feet.
Yeah, 6 feet. Yeah. 120 square foot at least. Yeah. Yeah, the, well, I put that, you don't really need that, that's just a hot water heater, overflow underneath the Nano desk dryer. It's not that big a deal if you want one. But I just felt like it's constantly running air through there, and over time, maybe there's some moisture would be a problem, but that's not necessary, just something I did. I think that's it. There was something else that runs in my mind that was a typical question, but I can't think what it is right now. Dang it. Short-term memory.
No other questions?
Yeah, I got one more. So I just got mine, well, I got mine a while ago, but when I opened it up, I didn't see the key for it. Would that have been anywhere? Now, maybe I missed it.
The key to access the locks on the
Yeah.
cabin doors?
Does that come with it?
Yeah.
If you bought a new one, you should have had that in a manual.
And
Yeah.
the manual, I didn't see it in the manual.
It's in the box. Comes with a big yellow box, right?
Yeah, it came with a couple big boxes, so maybe I'll just dig around a little more.
Well,
I didn't fully open everything.
Sometimes in the side door, a lot of the stuff is in that side door.
when they ship them, it comes in like a little Ziploc bag, and they kind of attach it to the one door lock right here.
Okay.
A lot of times they could I'm not saying that you did this, but a lot of times they can get grabbed with like the shrink wrap or
Yeah.
the box and thrown away. Lowe's Depot, 15 bucks, they got a multi-key with the exact same.
Okay.
Oh, I know what it is. The cooler, when you get a chance, you get up, take a look at the backside and see the oil cooler, the air oil cooler, that, they make a filter for that. So if you're in a dirty environment and you're running the same air that you're cleaning your cars with, you might want to invest in a filter to keep that condensing unit clean.
I was
And
looking,
Pete recommended
I was looking for that real quick,
Yeah.
sorry to be rude, just give me 1 second. I think it's Permatron, but I gotta look it up.
What's that?
It's a filter, it's a
Oh.
washable filter. Just an old media mat on the cooler in a dirty, dusty environment would suffice, but you can get like a magnetic filter. I think it's Permatron, but look it up, magnetic washable filters. You slap them on there. This is a great environment, so we don't have to worry about that. You don't get much better than this environment right here. Climate controlled, clean, dust free, so.
I was a little concerned about in a hot day when I'm running the AC in here, how much AC am I sucking through that system and blowing it out? And our first bill came in the hottest month, and running that system and running the ACs and it's 8,000 square foot, I was pretty surprised. It was like $380 to run a compressor and to cool the place. And I'm pretty disgusted that I spent virtually my entire career working in hot warehouse for 17 years over there, and then that big space by Tony's Pizza. If I'd known it was that cheap, I'd have done air conditioning a long time ago. It's your fault. I should have met you 10 years ago. Well, there's no other questions. We'll take a little break, and then we'll bring the insurance man to the front, and then we'll get some demos in. Appreciate it. I can't wait to hear where the key was.
See your little black box?